Yeah.
Okay, do we open up the meeting too for all attendees as well? Just want to make sure.
Okay, Shayla, we're good to go now.
Awesome, thank you. All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of United Way for Southeastern Michigan's What's the Word Wednesday, where we share important resources and have vibrant discussions that matter most to you. My name is Shayla Zimmerman, and today we are joined by 3 local mental health practitioners in our community for a discussion on healing and prioritizing yourself in recognition of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, also known as BIPOC, Mental Health Month. Formerly recognized in June 2008, B.B. Moore Campbell National Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, more widely known as BIPOC Mental Health Month, was created to bring awareness to unique struggles that underrepresented groups face in regard to mental illness in United States. B.B. Moore Campbell was an American author, journalist, teacher, and mental health advocate who worked tirelessly to shed light on the mental health needs of Black community members and other underrepresented communities. It is so important that we focus on and advocate for equitable mental health care for BIPOC communities this month and every month. A few reminders for today's discussion. We hope to have time for a few questions from the audience. So please put your questions in the chat box on Zoom or in the comment section if you're watching on Facebook. Closed captions are enabled in Zoom and Facebook Live. To turn them on, just click the Show Captions button at the bottom of your screen. So I'd like to introduce our guests for today. First, we have Patrice Lucas, MSLPC, so licensed professional counselor. Patrice. Oh, I'm sorry. We also have Caleb Boswell, MALLPC, therapist. And Dr. Crystal Woods, PhD, LP, licensed clinical psychologist. Everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today. Before we go into discussion, I'd just like for each of you to share a little bit about your work in the mental health space. Patrice, would you like to kick us off?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. I'm so happy to be here. I call myself a community counselor, and why I do that is because I do a lot of work in the community, and I enter into the community. Before the pandemic, one of the cornerstones of my work is I would meet my clients where they are or where they were, and that was physically and mentally. I would literally go into their homes, their offices, their churches, all the places that they needed someone to be of support for them, because all the time a lot of times you get all buttoned up and all dressed up to come and meet someone, but if you meet them where they are, you get to really get to know who they are and what they may need. So my private practice is called Indigo Transitions, and I have a social advocacy program called Coffee with a Counselor. I work with all clients from the cradle to the grave, which basically looks like I work and support different midwives and doulas who help me with the mamas and the babas on their transitions into parenthood. But I also do the end of life work as a grief doula or death doula, where I help people in the grief space and transitioning from that side of the transition of life as well.
Thank you so much, Patrice. It's such an honor to have you here today. And then Caleb, I'm going to kick it over to you.
All right, my name is Caleb Boswell. Thank you for having me today. I'm a college counselor and a therapist, so I work in both worlds. So I serve on the counseling faculty for a community college. And one of the things that I say about working in a college and educational setting is what shows up on my screen and what shows up at my desk or in post-COVID times on my phone can be two different things. And so, you know, on my screen, it may say an issue with a bio class or can't register for something, but in reality, we may have some living issues. We may be dealing with depression. Life may just be happening. And so it's cool to be able to assist students academically and educationally, but also to be there to help them with their personal things that they're going through. In the evening, I'm also a private therapist where I work with a clinic, the Counseling Clinic of Southeastern Michigan, and I see clients through private practice in the evening. And again, I deal with an array of issues, but typically what I've been dealing with is a lot of depression, anxiety, adjustment disorders, things of that nature. And even though it's not a specialty, I seem to catch a lot of men as my clients because a lot of Black men, a lot of men of color typically want another male therapist as their therapist to help them process. So it's not a specialty, but I enjoy my favorite groups to work with are teens through adults.
Not a specialty, but definitely something we need in our communities. So thank you, Caleb.
Thank you.
And Dr. Crystal Woods, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Woods, and I am a clinical psychologist and the director of an outpatient behavioral health clinic called Life Stands Health. It's in Southfield, Michigan. So at Life Stands Health, we have 18 clinics across Michigan and many more across the nation. We offer psychotherapy and psychiatry services. So I have had the absolute privilege of working in individual psychotherapy with adults for the last 10 years. I absolutely love it. I truly believe this is what I am put on this earth to do. So I am especially interested in goal setting. So as I think about therapy in kind of two streams. One stream is managing the negative emotions that you're dealing with at the time. And the other stream is honestly life change. So you're likely going through this time right now as a sign that something in your life needs to budge, something needs to move. So trying to think about what is that? What are the changes that I need to make moving forward in my life? So kind of working along, two streams and really into habit setting and goal setting. So this morning, though, I am very happy to take a moment from my regularly scheduled program at Life Stands Health to, be able to discuss mental health within communities of color. So my research interests are in the intersection of culture and gender and how knowledge of these intersecting identities should be used to inform treatment. So I'm really glad to be here.
Absolutely. That's so important. That's really important work. Thank you so much, Dr. Woods. And thank you all for sharing more about the great work that you do and telling us a little bit more about your journeys in the mental health sector. Let's kick off our discussion with health in BIPOC communities. So how do social determinants of health impact the mental health of those within BIPOC communities differently than those outside of BIPOC communities? Dr. Crystal Woods, I'm going to pass it over to you first.
So yeah, let's start by maybe defining some terms. So social determinants of health are the non-medical factors that still influence health outcomes. So those can be things like the economy, racism, climate change, politics, poverty, gentrification. So there's been a lot of research that shows that these seemingly outside factors, like the amount of green space in the neighborhood, feeling safe from violence in your area, having access to healthy food options, employment options, that they truly do impact our mental health. So if we already know that these factors, these social determinants of health, disproportionately negatively affect communities of color, it then stands to reason that they're at the root of a lot of the racial disparities in mental health systems and treatments.
Thank you for defining that too, Dr. Woods. it is really important that we think about health and mental health coinciding. Patrice, Caleb, did either of you want to speak on this as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, I always center racism and systemic oppression in this discussion, right? Which is the overreaching thing that really creates these social determinants for our communities, BIPOC communities, particularly the Black community here in America. And I think it's important for us to center that. So in my work, I often help my clients understand what are the things that are causing the challenges that they are facing. A lot of times it is environmental, a lot of times it is systemic, and then they are experiencing symptoms of those experiences. One of the great bodies of work that I study is post traumatic slave syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy. And I think it's important that we understand that, because if we don't, we won't understand what the BIPOC communities, particularly people in the Black community here in Detroit, are facing and what they're experiencing and how that is detrimental to their mental health.
So I would agree with both of the ladies as well. And I would just add on to that, looking at it from a racial standpoint or from a socioeconomic standpoint, those things typically compound whatever issues that are already going on. If we look at it from a racial standpoint and a systemic standpoint, and let's look at it from an educational standpoint, typically students who are dealing with racism or socioeconomic issues, that typically trumps the things that they're already going through in regards to trying to do classes, trying to navigate the system. So if anything, it just kind of compounds the problems that are already going on.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. And so when we think about healing from mental health illness or and healing radically from racism as well, can you tell me a little bit about what radical healing is, why it's important, and what it might look like for BIPOC communities? I know, Patrice, you mentioned that this is more of your expertise. So if you want to share first.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. So for me, radical healing begins with hope. I call myself a hope hustler. And what that looks like, particularly in the BIPOC communities, is that is what has grounded us and has sustained us for many, 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 many years, right? Is the hope that one day we will not be systemically oppressed. One day the racism and the tragic things that happen in our communities won't exist, right? And so radical healing, yes, absolutely. Radical self-care absolutely begins with self, but I also always point back to those systemic things. What are you doing to resist the systemic things that is happening in your community that impacts you so you can begin radical self-care? I believe you first have to acknowledge, right? Jay-Z, famous line is, you can't heal what you don't reveal, right? And I think we need to reveal what are the things that are healing us. So in my work, I often share with my clients, hey, let's list off the things that is impacting your health. And when I talk about health, I talk about the 7 pillars of health, which is mental, emotional, physical, financial, sexual, spiritual, and then relationship/community health. What are impacting those areas of your health? So you then can do some radical things, really radical things to elevate those areas of health.
Yeah, I love that. I love how, hearing about the ways that you are able to, in a very structured way, kind of center that in your work. To add, one of the things I think is interesting about radical healing is that, so yes, it takes into consideration like the emotional wounds kind of based on our different areas of identity, whether it's race, gender, sexual orientation. So, but it not only considers the bigotry we may have personally experienced due to various isms, it also takes into account the impact of the harm done, say, to our parents and our ancestors and how that still impacts us today. And so, which is important because we, nor our mood or our symptoms we don't live in a vacuum. We are all an amalgamation of the different experiences we've had in our relationships with others. So if I'm trying to think about how radical healing can look different than conventional healing, it's kind of like radical healing expands the healing focus. So if conventional healing is focused on regulating your emotions associated with traumatic events, Radical healing does that and uses maybe cultural specific practices to promote general resilience and well-being. Because the idea is that these oppressive systems are likely ongoing and ever present. So yes, we want to get over this hurdle, but this is also emblematic of the world we live in. So we want skills that will carry us on into the future.
Absolutely. I think radical healing also requires us to be responsible rebels. Right? Let me say that again. I think radical healing requires us to be responsible rebels as clinicians in our communities and BIPOC communities. And what I mean by that, we must rebel against the things that are harming our communities and our people. And what that may look like is we all trained under a European system of practice and psychology and counseling, but I really do take an Afrocentric approach and a cultural sensitivity approach to all of the work that I do in my community. One of the reasons I call myself a community counselor is because first, I'm of the community, particularly in the Black community. We don't talk to people we don't know. So I let my clients really, really get to know me. I am a part of their village. I am the village. I am of the village. I live, love, and work and play in the place that I also want to bring radical self-care and radical healing to. I'm a product of that, right? I'm healing alongside them because I'm too am in a system of oppression. I am too being harmed, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what I mean by being a responsible rebel. As I'm a responsible clinician, but I need to be a rebel for my people as well.
So
Sounds like you're trying to model that for them. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And I love the fact that you say that, and the cultural aspect of it is so important, because you are correct. From the roots that we are taught from is from a Eurocentric standpoint, but for so many people, that cultural aspect is so important to understand those mannerisms and those cultural things. Oftentimes for some people that leaves them feeling like a void, and they're like, I said something, but this person across me doesn't get it, or they're taking it literally.
Absolutely.
And so that cultural aspect is super duper important. So I thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm the resident and co-founding counselor for Where Do Black Women Go to Grieve? And we get and this is a 7-year community-based, donation-based, free work-based, pro bono-based body of work myself and Edify, Etta SB Thomas does in our communities. And why it's radical self-care is because we wanted to bring something specific to our communities. We talk about not having to explain the things of our culture and community and then get to the grief or get to the point where we're able to heal and be in community with each other. Whereas we have to do that. I don't have to explain the red cups, the hair ties. Sometimes we're sitting in session and the braids are being undone, or there's a bonnet being worn, or whatever you need to look like and show up. And it's just culturally accepted. Because where do Black women go to grieve? With other Black women.
I love that. And that's so incredibly powerful too. I think about sometimes even with mental health illnesses, we also mask, and sometimes it's easier to relate to someone that also has a similar condition as us, right? So I find that really powerful. So thank you for sharing that and for challenging those traditional systems as well. So I'm curious too. You talk a lot about. I hear you all talking a lot about prioritizing yourself in a system, in a community. So how do people prioritize themselves when they're dealing with stressors? But also, how do they prioritize themselves in community too? Caleb, I'm going to pass that over to you first. Yeah.
No problem. So I think it has to be a conscious choice. And when I say a conscious choice, even when people show up to therapy, sometimes people think, ta-da, I did it, I'm here. And that's still not enough. It has to be that conscious choice to want different, to want better, to do different. Because just showing up to therapy for that hour, you still have several hundred hours outside of this 1 hour that you're showing up for. And so that's one, is really being conscious and making it a priority and choosing that care as a priority. Because again, you can get the therapist, you can show up every week, but if you're not doing the work, if you're not trying to get into that process, if you're not trying to do different, because therapy is work. I tell people all the time, this is not you coming in here, sitting for an hour, we kick it, and I tell you how to go out and live your life. It is us going through, breaking down different things, helping you see things in a different perspective. And then me challenging you or helping you look at some things in a different way. And so one of those things, like I say, for that priority means that you are prioritizing your mental health and you are making it a choice and you are making it something that you really want to work on. And it's not something that's just on the back burner. In addition, another priority is no. No is a full sentence and a full statement. And one of those things in prioritizing sometimes is we have to learn to say no so that we can fit that time in. One of the things that I hear so often is, when am I going to do it? Well, if we might have to say no to some things to, again, kind of prioritize that hour or that 45 minutes. But it really boils down to taking some personal initiative to say, hey, I want to do something different. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to have all the answers. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to flip a switch and change tomorrow. But that priority is literally making it I keep saying priority, but I got another word for it, is putting it up front and making it a forefront for something that you want to do different. Because we are all going through things, we all go through different challenges. And again, we can put on a happy face and be high functioning and tell everybody everything is okay while we're suffering behind doors. In other cases, you have people where you can still see it plain as day. But again, if you don't want to do anything about it, those sad days, those struggles are still going to continue. And so that priority is really just saying, you know what, I think something is wrong. This hasn't been working, or I've tried these different things. Maybe I need to get some additional help, or maybe I need to do some special things for my self-care, or maybe I need to see someone professionally. But it is about taking that initiative, recognizing things may not be great, and then putting it in the forefront to get some help for it.
You are absolutely right. It is about saying, okay, if things aren't the way I want them to, then I would need to do something differently in order to get a different outcome. So I have to be willing to willing to actively do something different in order to possibly get a different outcome. And when I think about stress and kind of like the emotional upset that kind of happens with it, our emotions give us valuable information, even the ones like sadness and anxiety. So when our emotions are functioning at their best, they are cueing us into the fact that something is wrong and motivating us to ideally change the situation. So, and when that's the case, we don't necessarily just want to stifle or just manage the emotion, especially if the real source of the stress is that there is an issue or a problem in our life that we haven't addressed. And so our time would probably be better served by addressing the issue rather than trying to avoid it. So once we've identified that, we want to kind of make a distinction between, is this something within our control or outside of it? And so is this an issue that I can change, or is this something that, I do not have direct control over? So trying to change it would only increase my sense of frustration. Mm-hmm. And so if kind of, what is it? The serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So if the answer is no, you cannot control it, try then to kind of change your thinking about it. So trying to get out of the habit of kind of ruminating on negative events. So then we want to kind of try to take control of our minds. If the answer is yes, I can control it, we want to take action. We want to reduce that stress by getting like a sense of control with it. Even if that's a problem that cannot be fixed tomorrow, I do think there's a sense of peace that comes from feeling like you are progressively working towards the future, the goal, the thing that you want, or the thing that you need, the type of change that you need in your life. So kind of trying to strike a balance between actively working towards positive change and then radically accepting your world where it is currently.
I just want to piggyback off of that real quick and add something to that, because I totally agree. One thing that I also say to my clients, sometimes, when people come to therapy, they think they treat it like a cold. And that's the analogy that I like to give.
Mhm.
A lot of times people treat their mental health like a cold, and they think, yo, I'm gonna come to therapy, and like a cold, in 3 to 7 days, I'm gonna feel better. And in some cases, yes, there are some things that we go through in life that we can actually literally heal from and feel better. But there are some things that we may not be able to necessarily heal from in that way. And so the analogy that I like to use is that sometimes our mental health is not like a cold, it's like asthma. There are people who live with asthma and still live healthy lives. They just learn how to manage it. And so in some cases, it may not be about healing or you're going to feel better or we're going to work through this. In some cases, it may be like, you know what, that was pretty crappy and that was terrible. How can we learn to manage and not let this terrible thing ruin our everyday life, ruin our long-term life, and how can we learn to manage it in that standpoint? So that's also another important thing, is that when you come, it's not like, yo, I'm going to come and I'm gonna walk out here in an hour and everything is going to be a-okay. It took us more than an hour to get here. So it's going to take us more than an hour to heal from this and unravel some of these things.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback off of what others said, I think the word we're using here, or the terminology, is cope. Right? There are times we have to figure out how to cope with the things that we cannot change. Right?
Mhm.
Cope with the things we cannot change, and then do some, soul searching and really work with a licensed practitioner to change the things that we can change. During the height of the pandemic, I adopted the phrase, when people would ask me, how are you doing? I would say I'm well enough. And then I would list the things I was well enough to do. But that helped me acknowledge that there were ever present things in the background and challenges that I was dealing with. Some of those things I cannot change, but some of those things I can change. But if I'm like, I'm okay, I'm fine, I'm good, which is what we all do all the time. We did it on this call when we were introducing ourselves. How are you doing today? All that, all good, good, good. There's some stuff in the background for all of us, even the clinicians on the call, right? And so I adopted the phrase, I'm well enough. I'm well enough to be here smiling in my little mauve dress with my hair all cute and all that kind of stuff. But there's some stuff I'm dealing with. And I think it's important for us to be ever present of the things that are challenging us so we can address them. Some of those challenges, like the other clinicians, Dr. Crystal and Caleb shared, they cannot be healed or overcame, but we can certainly find ways to cope with them. And then the things that you identify, like, okay, I can make some changes in my own life and lessen that impact on myself, or change or make these changes and not experience this any longer. We need to be able to do that. I often tell my clients that discomfort is their friend. They hate me when I share that with them. They're in the midst of a discomfort and I'm sitting there and really kind of basically explaining to them, well, this discomfort is present in your life because it's an opportunity for you to act. And I think Dr. Crystal spoke on that as well.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. And then as I think about like, what does self-care, what does prioritizing yourself look like? What do those coping methods look like? One of the things I ask people to start with, and that I personally do myself, is having a list, making a list of the activities that improve your mood. And literally having that visible. So I have a list. I encourage them to make a list of about 10 things. Mine includes listening to music, Beyonce specifically, going for walks, stretching, cooking. Like, there are just things that I know if I do them, if mood is on a scale from 1 to 10, I'm going to bump up by at least 2 points. So making a list of those things. And then when I feel that sense of unrest, literally walking over to that list. Because sometimes when you are in a space of sadness or anxiety, you may not be thinking as clearly as you normally do. That's why I literally have it posted on a bulletin board in my home. So I do know enough that I could walk over there and then remind myself, okay, let's start working down that list of things. So that's kind of how I approached it at first. And then I started thinking, what if I did each of these things in some small way every day? What if every day I went for a 10-minute walk? What if every day I, listened to headphones on that walk? Every day I did some, meal prep for my family. Does that help with prevention? Does that help with maintaining mental health? And I truly believe it does. So there is now just a set of things and systems that I've set up for myself and that I encourage my patients to do as well that put them at 100%. What are the number of hours of sleep that put you at 100%? What are the types of things you put in your body that put you at 100%? What are the people in your life that put you at 100%? Or the ones that put you at 32%? And wanting to really set up systems that allow you to put yourself in that place each day. And then when stressors come in, because they will, that's what life looks like. The stressors will come in. And so the idea then is when it does, you are at a better place to manage them because you're managing them at 100%. And that you have a version of each of these habits, of each of these life things that is small enough that you could do on your worst day. So yes, you may be stressed, you may have something coming up and have less time. So maybe you can't do the 3-mile walk that you normally do, but maybe you can walk around the block. Mm-hmm. The idea that you still want some smaller level version of each of these things that you are committing to doing every day, because you need those things even more in those times of stress. They're even more important, not less. So we want to figure out how, in whatever small way, we can still keep those a daily part of our lives.
Absolutely. I think we also have to make sure we talk about optimal brain health here, right? And we're talking about some of the things on the list, but the first 3 things on that list should also be hydration, right? Mm-hmm. And nutrition, and then that breath work, right? Like just, right, we could all probably benefit on the call from taking a quick couple of minutes to breathe. So nourishment, hydration, and breathing. Every time my client calls or texts me or they share that they're going through something, have you hydrated? Have you nourished yourself with nutritionally dense foods? Are you breathing, right? Are you pausing? Are you taking a minute to just self-regulate a little bit, right? And I think it's important that we put those on the list. I know you shared that, what gets you to 100% in BIPOC communities, we can't get to 100% because of the systemic oppression that exists in our communities. But we do need to know what optimal health looks like under the conditions we face, right? And so I always say, I think the most optimally healthy that I've been based on the systems that I encounter and the systemic oppression that I experience and that my loved ones experience and that I'm experiencing every day, it's probably about 80-85%. And so when I dip below there, I know that I need to really go to my list. And what have you ate today? Are you hydrating? Are you nourishing, Patrice? What is going to elevate your health today, Patrice? And I think that's what Dr. Crystal is saying. I just wanted to soften that 100% a little, because I think sometimes people in our community, they're like, oh, why am I not okay? And we really do have to look at those systemic things.
So I agree with everything that everybody has said. And it also goes back to what I stated earlier and what Dr. Wood said in regards to just making that time and choosing to make that time a priority. The other thing that I also want to stress about as I listen to everyone speak is we talk about coping and we talk about self-care, but what does that actually look like? And one of the things that I do with clients is that I purposely do not use labels in regards to negative coping mechanisms or positive coping mechanisms. I'm gonna paint a story and I'm gonna put it out there, but I need you to determine if that is beneficial for you or not for me to determine that for yourself. So, some people may go, oh, I need some retail therapy. That's self-care. I feel good. Yes, you got the purse or you got the gym shoes or whatever, and you felt good in the moment, but is that helping you in the long term? Because are we in financial debt? Are we creating additional crisis? Are we harming ourselves in the long term for that quick, short burst of I need to feel better? And so I think it's also super important that we learn what our real coping mechanisms are and what really is positive for us and what doesn't impact us in the best way. And like I say, I personally don't use labels because what may be a positive for one person may not be for the next person. Telling somebody who, to go out and get something and do something for yourself because you deserve it may be exactly what one person may need. but that may be the complete opposite advice of the next person. So that's why I say it's super important that we understand our coping mechanisms and understand how they are helping us, not just in the moment, but in the long term as well.
Absolutely. And I love how each of you have spoken about mechanisms that we can use on our own every day as well. And so thinking about each of you are a, prominent, important therapist or counselor, community counselor, if you will, in your community. How can someone go about finding the right therapist? And what are some tips that you have for people that might be looking for their right therapist?
I can roll. So one of the easiest things that I tell people to just kind of start off with is that to reach out, if you have insurance, reach out to your insurance and see who is in network. And then you can run that network on a couple different platforms. There's Psychology Today, there's Clinicians of Color, where different clinicians pay to have their profiles put on there, and you can run filters, you can run for specific styles of treatment or specific ailments that they may specialize in. You can do, specific race, you can do somebody from a particular area. So that is what I say for the bare basics. In regards to getting that ball rolling, is to reach out to your insurance, find out who's in network, and then run that list against profiles on those sites so that you're actually choosing someone who you feel is a good fit for you. And so you don't feel like you're just pulling a name out of a hat.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I sometimes before we started, Caleb mentioned this as well. We both often worked as concierge for some people that we don't try to find, a therapist that's a good fit for them, because fit is so important with therapy.
Mm-hmm.
So someone could be a really good therapist, but just not a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really important to try to find a good fit. And some of the things that I think can help you with a head start are sites like Psychology Today, which I use as well. And I even use for those concierge services. So I'm asking the person, okay, what insurance do you have? What age range would you prefer for the therapist? Is race important for you? Is gender important for you? And a lot of those are factors you can literally just click off in the filters, and it gives you a list. So then you click on profiles, you already get to see a picture. And I would say take that picture into consideration. Does that look like somebody you could talk to? Do they have a friendly face? This is a perfectly, and I mean, you aren't looking necessarily for a beauty queen, but this is the perfect time to be shallow and say, does this look like somebody I can connect with? Then once you see that little picture, and then you can click on and view their entire profile, and the therapists there get to describe how they approach therapy. So this is just free text where they talk about their approach, and people have very different descriptions that they put for that. So read through it and see, does this resound with me? Like, does this sound like the way I want to approach what I'm dealing with right now? And you can also, there are also different communities. Like, so you can say, you can even search for, I am not only by race, but religious factors, whether or not they, consider themselves allied with different identities, LGBTQIA, which is like, because that is important to know before you are sitting across from somebody, to know that you will be fully accepted. So I love sites like that. LifeStance Health also has profiles for each of its therapists where you can see, a picture and an idea of what they specialize in. The other piece is, do you want in-person or virtual? So we're living in a world now where a lot of therapy is available using video conferencing, which, it just depends on what you think is the best fit for you. So you can also search for that including areas. So I love it.
Yeah. As an exclusively referral-based clinician, like literally me and my children eat because of referrals, I love the power of referral. And it does take a little bit of owning that, hey, I'm not okay, and being vulnerable and reaching out to your village and community and saying, hey, do you know, I need someone to talk to. Do you know someone? And so that's how I get my clients into my practice, into my grief group, into all of the, even my coffee with the counselor, even being able to come and share with you today is the power of referral. Again, in many BIPOC communities, and particularly in the Black community, we often don't talk to people we don't know. And so what that looks like, we want someone to kind of give us that handheld experience. But even with referrals, right, and using the list, and there's so many that is being shared and listed in the chat. I shared probably 10 plus lists that will help people, direct people to different avenues and profiles to be able to find a clinician. I think you need to shop around for a therapist, right? So just because you go to a therapist or go to a counselor, you need to, just like you would a doctor, if it's not a good fit, if you don't get that warm, fuzzy feeling, if they don't have that bedside manner or the couch manner or the talking manner that works for you, don't hesitate to keep looking until you find someone that's a good fit for you. I personally have been going to counseling on and off since I was like 16 years old. I probably had over 5 different counselors, and all of them met me where I was in that time in my life. So I needed Deborah when I was, a 20-something-year-old young girl going through all that crazy stuff. And she was a white social work woman, and she met me where I needed to be, and I needed her at that time. And then I've had older Black women, and then I had older Black men, and then I had Christian counselors. So wherever you are in your season and what would resonate with you and bring about that healing and that elevation of health that you need, find that person and don't stop looking until you find them.
I want to piggyback off of that, because one thing that because I do have men, so the example that I usually give is a barbershop example. Just because you're not feeling it, you're not feeling this person, doesn't mean that you're going to stop therapy forever. So just like you go to a barber and you may not like that cut, that doesn't mean that you're going to stop getting your hair cut forever. It just means you're just going to go out and find a barber that works best for you. That is the same with therapy. If you feel like it is not a fit, that doesn't mean that, this mess doesn't work. I gave it a shot, and it's I came here just one time. This person didn't see eye to eye with me. I knew it wouldn't work. Sometimes it's about fit, a cultural fit, or just like Patrice said, somebody being able to find you where you're at. And just because you don't necessarily find that right person, maybe on that first shot or that second shot, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to work out. Second, just because your therapist challenges you, that also does not mean for you to get up and go. That is what we are here for. I am not here to pat you on the head and say, you're amazing and everything you do is wonderful and da, 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 da. Sometimes I have to call you out and be like, yo, you're the problem. That janky behavior is you. This is why, we may be able to fill in that. And so sometimes when individuals get challenged or they get, have to be held accountable for their behavior, it's like, oh, I got to go because now I got to do some actual work, or I have to make some changes. And it's not my mom who needs to change, or my boyfriend who needs to change, or my kids, but it's me who needs to change. So let me run and go. So also don't up and run if you come across somebody who is challenging you. It's about balance. They're not putting you down. They're not belittling you, but they are, you should have somebody who is able to call you out and challenge you on some of your behaviors. And that should not be a red flag to leave.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. You may have to kiss a few frogs before you find it. And as therapists, we do not have ego involved in it. We understand that this is a part of the process. So it is perfectly okay at the end of your first, third, 8th session to be like, I don't think, or maybe at the end of your 36th session to say, I think I've gotten all that I could from this. And be able to, have another season with another therapist that can meet you where you are currently, where that therapist helped to bring you to, as Patrice described. The other piece I want to speak about is the perceived cost of therapy. So I do think there's a lot of talk about therapy is expensive. It's for rich people. I do want to break that down a bit. Therapy can be offered at a lot of different price points. And if you are someone, say, without insurance or underinsured, there are specific organizations, some of which that offer free services, but or at very low cost, one of which I used to work at. It was a federally qualified health center. There are several in the area. The one I worked with was the Wellness Plan Medical Centers. I was the head of their behavioral health department. And so if you walk in there and you say, I'd like to make an appointment with a therapist, they're going to schedule you with a therapist. They'll try to get some information. There may be even some community health workers that'll try to talk to you about what your insurance options are, but you can get services. It's generally a primary care clinic, which a lot of the FQHCs are, but you can literally get free services. And so whatever price point you're at, I do believe you can find therapy services that will meet you there.
One other one that you made me think about that I forgot to mention earlier, a lot of universities that have counseling programs.
It's true.
They offer, so when I was a student, I saw people in the community. That's how we learn. So we're not quote unquote practicing on mannequins, but we're actually able to see people in the community. And even though the person who you're seeing at that time is still a student, they are monitored by a therapist. And oftentimes those services are free to cheap. So I know when I was going through grad school, my 5 or 6 clients who I saw, none of them had to pay because they look at income. And I think the most someone would have to pay at the clinic was probably like $20 a session. I think that was probably the max, and then it scaled down to free. So that's also another one. So locally, you have Wayne, you have UAD, you have Eastern, you have Oakland. All of those institutions have counseling programs on master's and PhD levels, and those students need work. And so that's also another option.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for these great resources for our communities. And we are at time, but I just wanted to thank you all so much for joining us today and speaking truth about mental health. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For having me.
I just want to close us with a few reminders to our audience. As a reminder for anyone in our community who may be experiencing a need, our 211 helpline remains available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. This includes resources like food, utility assistance, even mental health assistance as well, referrals, much more. We always maintain a running list of available services in the community and can connect you to the support you need. So you can also look up resources in your area by using our 211 resource database at unitedwaysem.org/211. If you're looking for opportunities to get involved in the community as a volunteer, United Way's volunteer portal can help. Our online portal lets you search volunteer opportunities that best match your abilities, needs, and interests. So it even lets you set up alerts for types of volunteer projects or organizations you care most about. Just visit unitedwaysem.org/volunteer to get started. And lastly, our next What's the Word Wednesday Town Hall is a very special United Way merger panel discussion on August 9th. So please join United Way for Southeastern Michigan's President and CEO, Dr. Darian Hudson, and United Way of Washtenaw County President and CEO, Pam Smith, as they talk about the historic United Way merger and how we're uniting for a brighter future. Be sure to tune in for that town hall and more coming up. To stay updated on our upcoming town halls and watch replays of previous town halls, please visit unitedwaysem.org/virtual town halls. Thank you everyone so much. We will see you soon. Stay safe and continue to live united. Thanks y'all.